Gallagher family taken in the backyard of their home in Mayfield, Pennsylvania. Now from left to right is Joe Gallagher, Seal Gallagher, my grandfather Charles Gallagher, my grandmother Jenny Gallagher, whose real name was Mary Joanna Keating Gallagher. And on the far right is James Gallagher. Now if we can bring him in a little closer. This is Joe Gallagher, Seal, my grandfather Charlie, my grandmother, and James. Now there is three more, which we will add. There is my mother, Mary, my Aunt Margaret Tierney, and there was a Helen Gallagher. Picture of my mother when she was single and young and still at home. I'm not sure of her age there, but this is my mother, Mary Gallagher. Here is a picture of Margaret Tierney Gallagher. This picture of Joe, when I was young, when I would go to Pennsylvania, Joe was a streetcar conductor. And they'd send me out with his lunch, I'd climb on the streetcar, and he'd take me to the end of the line and back for a ride on the streetcar. Now I was very small. And then later, when the streetcars got almost out of existence, he moved to Buffalo and became a bus driver in Buffalo. Now, my grandfather Charlie, he was in the streetcars. He run streetcars too. But he died when I was real young. I really don't remember ever seeing the man. That's how young I was. And when we come over to James, now the only thing I know about James is he died early. He died, I was just in school when he died, and he lived in Buffalo, and he worked on the railroad. I think he worked on the Lackawanna Railroad. And that's all I remember about him. I don't remember seeing him either, but he was a pretty big man. This is a picture of James Gallagher and my mother. Now, it must have been taken a long time ago. As you can see, this is James and my mother. My mother has Katie's eyes. This picture was taken in Buffalo in what is known as a Kenfield project. And my grandmother was still alive, and she lived with Seal. Seal was single. Seal always remained single. So from left to right, we have Joe and his mother. And then came Seal and Margaret, and then my mother. Doesn't come out too good, but this was taken in Buffalo. Margaret Tierney. Now this picture, well, had to be taken about 1946. I was out of the service. Clyde was still in the service. And to give you an idea who these people are, on the top row, from the left to right, is Jimmy Tierney and his mother Margaret, Bob Tierney, Helen, and myself. And down in the first row is my mother, Seal, my grandmother, Joe Gallagher, with his daughter Mary in front of him, and then Clyde holding his son Jimmy and Jane. Now to give maybe a closer view of them, up in the back, we have Jimmy, Margaret, Bob, and then Helen and I. Now down in the bottom row was my mother, Seal, her mother, Joe and his daughter Mary, Clyde holding Jimmy, and Jane. This was in Buffalo at about 1946. Now at the same occasion, and from the left is Joe's daughter Mary, Jimmy Tierney, little Jimmy Eddinger, and Bob Tierney, or Bobby. So we have Mary Gallagher, Jimmy Tierney, Jimmy Eddinger, and Bob Tierney. Descendants of the Gallaghers. These will not be in order. In order for me to show you pictures of the families, I have slides on projectors and photos, and I can't do them both at once. So I'll show you these. Now this is Margaret Tierney. Bob's on the left, Margaret, and then Jim. That is the three of them. This is taken alongside of my house. Now Margaret was married to Emmett Tierney. They lived in Niagara Falls. He was a civil engineer. And when Jimmy was still a baby, Emmett died. And Margaret had to bring the two children up by herself. And she wound up living in Colorado with Bob, and she died a year ago. She never had it very easy. She was a teacher and still couldn't get a job because she was married and had children in those days. Bob, for a year, Bob lived with my mother and father and went to school here to help him out. Now this is a picture of my Aunt Margaret Tierney Gallagher. She's holding one of her son Bob's children. And this is taken in Buffalo. Picture of Jimmy and Joan Tierney. Now they had two children. They separated while Jimmy he worked for Mobil. He worked over here in a cordite plant in Connecticut. And he was a patent man. He was a patent attorney for him. And he got himself into a lot of problems. So that's Joan and Jimmy. And they had 2 children. They lived in Palmyra for a while. But Jimmy had his problems. Now this is Bob and Teresa and 2 of their children. They lived in Buffalo, and he worked for the Courier Express. The Courier Express went out of business, and then he moved to Colorado. He was up in Cheyenne for a while, and I think now he's down near Denver. Bob and his wife. I think this is about the best I can get it. This is Bob and Teresa. As I said, they're now in Colorado. Now this is a picture also taken in Buffalo. This is my Aunt Seal, my Aunt Margaret, and my mother. The 3 sisters. This is Seal, Margaret, and my mother. Now this is a picture of my Uncle Joe. He was a bus driver in Buffalo at the time, and his wife Grace. Joe and Grace Gallagher. They had 1 daughter, Mary. Their picture of Joe and Grace. Joe and Grace Gallagher. Grace and my Uncle Joe. My Uncle Joe now is still alive. He has gray hair, and he has just as much hair as ever. Now this picture is taken here at the side of my house, and this is Joe Gallagher's family. From left to right, we have Mary Gallagher Turner, and then her husband Bill Turner, Joe and Grace, and 2 of Mary's children. I think the one with glasses is Billy, and the other is Mary Grace. So this is Mary and Bill Turner. Bill Turner died a few years ago, very young. And then of course we had Joe and Grace, Mary's mother, and then down we had Billy and Mary. Mary Grace, I believe her name is. So this was Joe Gallagher's family. They only had 1, and that was Mary, her daughter. And she lived in Buffalo too. All of them lived in Buffalo. Now this is a picture of Charles Gallagher. In other words, his father had been dead a long time. And with him, his father was James Gallagher, my mother's brother. And with him is his wife Grace. This is taken down to the farm, and in the background is my wife Helen. Call him Chuck. We really call him Charlie Suntag. I haven't got a picture of his mother with me. She remarried again, and it'll show up in the next picture. This is a picture taken down to the farm at a family reunion. The Gallaghers got together. Now, way in the back row is my mother, and then the next man is Chuck's stepfather, and then's Helen, and then myself. And then from the left to the right is Bill Jr., Lynn, Charlie's daughter, and Charlie's wife. And down in the front row, of course, is Polly Wally and Chuck's 4 children. 4 more. He had 5 children. I'm not sure their names, but you can tell the one right there looks like him. So if we can bring it a little closer. As you can see, this group right here on those 2 rows is Bill Jr., my mother behind him, Lynn, and Chuck's father-in-law. I mean stepfather, not father, stepfather. And then Chuck's daughter, Helen behind her, and Chuck, and then myself and Charles's wife Grace in front of me. Then further down is Chuck's children and Polly Wally with a sucker stick in his mouth, and then Chuck's 2 smaller children. This was taken at one of the reunions we had down to the farm when everybody came down from Buffalo. So this is the entire group. Now this is a picture starting from the left. His name was Bill Coveney. He was a friend of Seal's, and he went around with Seal in their latter years. And that's Seal, my Aunt Margaret, and my mother. That's the 4 of them. Now this is Bill Coveney and Seal Gallagher. And then coming over is Margaret and my mother. Taken in Buffalo. I think they were out to Father Baker's or someplace. This is a picture of Bob and Teresa and 2 of their kids. They're sitting on the tractor at a party at the farm. My father used to throw the parties every once in a while. And they're sitting on the tractor. Bob and Teresa. This is another picture of Bill Coveney and my Aunt Seal. They used to come down to my father's quite often for weekends, and they loved to walk around the farm. Bill Coveney and my Aunt Seal. Now James Gallagher had 2 daughters. This one here is Grace. In other words, it's Charles Gallagher's, the ones pictures we've been looking at. This is his sister Grace. He had 2 daughters, but this is the only one I have a picture of. This is a picture of Bob and Jim. Bob and Jim Tierney. Margaret's 2 sons. Bob and Jim, or Jimmy. We were having a wedding, somebody's wedding. Everything else I do, I just came across some more photos. I knew I had a picture of this woman, James Gallagher's wife. Is this lady right here. Now when she remarried again, she remarried this man here, and I'm not sure of their names. And of course, this is her son and her granddaughter. This is Chuck. That's Chuck and his mother and his stepfather and his wife. Down below is one of their children and another one of their children, a boy and the daughter. This is the family. These pictures are all taken in front of my father's home, which Lynn now lives in. This is on the farm. Now at this reunion, my father bunched all the Gallaghers together. From the far left, partly is Charles Gallagher, then is Joe, and in front of him is his daughter Mary, and then comes Grace, Joe's wife, and then becomes my mother, then Seal, and behind Seal is Bob Tierney. Then in front of him is my Aunt Margaret, and then Jim. We'll see if we can get him a little clearer, or bring him in. So in other words, we have Charles Gallagher, James's son. Then we have Joe, Mary in front of her, Mary Turner. Then Grace Gallagher, my mother, Seal, and we have Bobby, his mother in front of him, Margaret, and James. It's a family reunion at the farm. These are the Gallaghers, what's left of them. Pictures didn't come out too good, but this is the men that were at the party. And of course that's Charles's father-in-law on the left. Then comes Jimmy, Charles, Joe, Bob, my brother Clyde, that man I do not know, and myself. I don't know if we can clear this up any, but let's go over to the edge and see what we can do. So we have, on the left, we have Chuck's father-in-law, we have Jim Tierney, and we have Charles. Then we have Joe, Bob Tierney, my brother Clyde, this man here, I forget his name, and yours truly, me. My gosh, I look heavy there. Looks like I put on a few pounds. This is at a party at the farm. Ladies at the party at the farm. I'll call them off from a distance and then get in closer, but maybe I better get in closer. We'll try. It's hard to take it off these photos. This, starting from the left, is Seal, my mother, Grace Gallagher, Helen up behind Grace, Charles Gallagher's mother, or James Gallagher's wife. Then we have Mary Gallagher, and Charles' wife Grace, and that looks like Jane there. And the other lady I'm not sure of, Seal, that one I'm not sure of. And this one, I'm double checking back here. I'm not sure who this one is either. But it was at a family party. This is a whole group at that party, and the pictures do not come out good. No matter what you do to it, I can't seem to help it. So we go from this way. I figure the one on the end is Charles. Next one is Grace. The next two I'm not sure of. That's Chuck's mother and his stepfather, Jim Tierney, Margaret, my mother, Bob, Joe's wife Grace, and Mary Gallagher, Joe, Jean and Clyde, and Helen and I. As you can see, we just can't get a good focus on this. It must be the film, what it was printed on. It can't be Kodak. And down below, we have all the kids. Seal is sitting with the kids. And that one there, beyond me too. Now this is Paulie sitting with Charles Gallagher's children. I don't know their names. But this is Charles Gallagher's children right in here. And of course, leave it to Paul to get mixed in. He's always good at that. Now we'll start in on the Edinger family. This is my father's grandfather. That would be my great-grandfather. This is taken in Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, where he lived. And he was a retired veteran of the Civil War. He and 6 of his brothers were in the Civil War. As they always said, they remarked, he came out with a pension. They said he's one of the fortunate ones that came out with a pension. And my father used to go down there in the early 1900s. And at that time, he peddled fuel oil. After he peddled fuel oil or cooking oil, they'd go around and everybody come out with their can. And he had a wagon and everything. And I think my brother took the picture of that. But this is my great-grandfather. I don't know what the outfit is he had, but it looked pretty classy for his day. And I'm looking at the horse. And I'm trying to figure what the horse has got on its head. I'd say it was flowers or something. I don't know. Or else I'm cracking up in my old age. Beautiful horse. And this, my grandfather, John N. Eddinger. One of his brothers was named Cyrus Edinger. And as the story goes, Cyrus was hung out in the West after the Civil War for robbing trains. Everybody has a skeleton in their closet. That's my grandfather, John N. Now this is my grandmother, Mary C. Brutz Eddinger. Brutz. This is taken, must be in someone's backyard. And as you see, I take after her for smiling in all the pictures. Because she sure is smiling. And I think that's my grandfather, great-great-grandfather, sitting on the front porch taking it easy. That's a trait of the Eddingers. They like to take it easy. Now, my grandfather kept bees. And this picture here is pretty old. On the left is his daughter Florence. And then, of course, comes my grandfather John. And this little one here is Ralph Eddinger. That is Ralph Eddinger. And over here, we have a Ed Eddinger. What do I know about these people? Very little. Very, very little. So that would be Ed, Ralph, my great-grandfather, and his daughter, Florence. And as you see, they're in amongst the beehives. So he had to be a beekeeper. Now at the same time, seeing he wasn't in the picture, this had to be my grandfather, William Noah Eddinger, and his sister Florence. You notice it was taken in front of the beehives, and that's my grandfather and his sister Florence. Two of the Eddingers, two of my distant relatives. My grandfather looked pretty sharp in those days. Now this is a picture, a wedding picture of my grandmother, Mary Devitt Eddinger, and William Noah Eddinger. She would be Mary Devitt Eddinger and William Eddinger. The year this was taken, I'm not too sure. But this is my grandmother, Mary Eddinger. And down here is my grandfather. They eloped, got married by the Baptist, we got married by the Justice of Peace. Family was furious because he was quite a drinker. So the dress of the day was, you can see the dress of the day that she had. So that was probably, she probably got married shortly after, in about between 1900 and 1903, this picture was taken. I mean 1890 and 1893, that's about the time this picture was. So it was in the late 1800s. This picture I have is, as you see, time has passed and they had 3 children. This was taken on the porch of where they lived in Buffalo, New York. So as you see is my grandfather on the left. The first one is Pearl. The second one is Clyde. The next one is my father. And then my grandmother. And if we get a little closer maybe, this is my grandmother. Now this was probably taken about 1900 or 1901 or 2. And that's my father, the smallest one. And then his brother, older brother Clyde, he was the oldest. And then Pearl. And then my grandfather. Now, there's period time in Buffalo. My grandmother took a trip to Pennsylvania. When she come back, this guy was a drinker. When she come back, there wasn't one chair, one stick of furniture in the house. He'd pawned it all for booze. And during this period of time, he worked on, I don't know which railroad he worked on in out of Buffalo, but he got fired for being drunk on the job. Now, at that time, our name was always spelled Eddinger. Well, he couldn't get another job. He was blackballed every place else. So he moved to Manchester and hired out on the Lehigh Valley and changed his name to 1D. In those days, that meant he was a different man. He was a different name. So that's why my name, you'll see it a lot, my father's name was always 1D on the railroad. He had to keep it that way because my grandfather, the only way he could hold his job is to change his name. And that's how they happened to come to Manchester, and he hired out on the Lehigh Valley Railroad. Now, the first house they lived in when they came to Manchester is up on State Street, and the back of the house is the transfer on the Lehigh Valley. This is the house that, when I grew up, the O'Donnells lived there. And one of the O'Donnell's sons still lives there. This is the O'Donnell house on State Street. This was the first house they lived in when they came to Manchester. And you notice, you can tell these people were Irish. My grandmother was Irish. Because like Leo McNally, they painted all the bottom of the trees white. I don't know why, but that seemed to be that seemed to be a trait of the Irish. Well, I can't make them out, but that's some of my family there. I know my Aunt Pearl is someone else, but I can't make out who they are because this picture's so old I can't bring it in. But that's on State Street. The O'Donnell house. Their first house in Manchester.